boardrooms, in store visits, in the research I'm reading. There's a word that keeps coming up in every retail conversation I'm having right now. And that word's not AI, it's not automation, it's not transformation. The word is uncertainty. Mortgage rates hovering near 7%, consumer sentiment at its lowest level in years. Geopolitical instability that's reshaping supply chains in real time. When leadership doesn't communicate clearly, the frontline fills in those gaps with rumors and anxiety and their general disengagement. The associate who used to greet every customer gladly and now keeps their head down in their phone. And that's not a morale problem or a frontline problem. That's a communication failure that started 3 levels above her, and the customer feels every bit of it. When the strategy is uncertain, it's the front line that absorbs it first, every single time. There's a word that keeps coming up in every retail conversation I'm having right now. In the boardrooms, in store visits, and in the research I'm reading, the word's not AI, it's not automation, it's not even transformation. The word is uncertainty. Now, new Forrester Research is calling this moment peak ambiguity. And when I look at what that actually means for people running retail organizations, especially for the people working in them, I think that word doesn't begin to cover it. I'm Ron Thurston. This is Retail in America. Every episode, I'll give you 3 human truths about retail, about technology, and the people caught in between. So let's get into what's happening today. Let me first paint the picture Forrester's looking at right now. Mortgage rates hovering near 7%, consumer sentiment at its lowest level in years. Geopolitical instability that's reshaping supply chains in real time, and a retail bankruptcy rate that hit 37 major filings in 2020 and has been climbing again since 2023. Forrester's summary of all of this is quite direct. Most of the problem is uncertainty. Not the interest rates, not the bankruptcies, the uncertainty itself. It's the not knowing. The planning for 3 scenarios instead of 1 that I'm sure you're doing in every meeting. The inability to make a long-term people decision or a hiring decision when you don't know what the next quarter even looks like. And here's what no one in that macro conversation is saying loudly enough, that when the strategy is uncertain, it's the front line that absorbs it first, every single time. So let me give you my 3 human truths today. Human truth number 1, uncertainty is a leadership problem that becomes a frontline crisis. And so here's how it plays out. The executive team is navigating ambiguity at the top. Budgets are uncertain. Headcount decisions are on hold. Strategic priorities that shift every quarter. And in that environment, communication to the front line becomes the first casualty. The store manager stops getting clear direction. The associate stops hearing why things are changing. And the district leader is asked just to hold the line, but no one tells them which line or for how long. And consumer sentiment tells us exactly what happens next. When confidence falls, and right now it's falling, consistently across every major index, customers become more demanding, become less forgiving, and they're quicker to walk away. They need more from your front line at the exact moment your front line has the least clarity about what they're supposed to be doing. And I have lived through multiple cycles of retail uncertainty. The financial crisis, this so-called retail apocalypse, which really set me on the course of retail in America, the pandemic, and the pattern is always the same. When leadership doesn't communicate clearly, the frontline fills in those gaps with rumors and anxiety and their general disengagement. And I've walked into stores during uncertain periods and felt it immediately. And I'm sure you have too. Not in the displays, not in the product. It's in the energy. The associate who used to greet every customer gladly and now keeps their head down in their phone. The manager who used to run tight huddles every morning has stopped having them because she doesn't really know what to say. And that's not a morale problem or a frontline problem. That's a communication failure that started 3 levels above her. And the customer feels every bit of it. And this peak ambiguity at the top is not an excuse for silence at the store level. In fact, I would argue the opposite. The more uncertain the environment, the more your frontline needs to hear from you and your leadership, not from spin, not your talking points, honest, clear communication about what you know, what you don't know, and what you're doing about it. Let's move into human truth number 2. The manager crisis is retail's hidden emergency. So there's a layer of your organization that's carrying more right now than at any point in recent memory. They're managing through AI deployments they weren't trained for. They're absorbing turnover rates that have their teams perpetually understaffed. They're navigating consumer expectations that keep rising, and they're doing all of it while the strategy shifts around them. That layer is your store managers, your frontline leaders, the people UKG's global study described as operating inside 2 separate cultures, one for the floor and one for everyone else. And here's the crisis inside that data. When 47% of your frontline team feels like they exist in a different world than the people making decisions, it's not the associates who feel that distance most acutely. It's that store manager caught between those 2 worlds every single day. And I really want to spend a moment celebrating and talking about store managers because in my 30 years of retail, I've never seen this role carry more weight or honestly receive less investment than it does right now. The store manager is your AI adoption lead. Whether anyone gave them that title or not, they're the ones rolling out the new scheduling tool, explaining the new task management platform, and answering questions from the associates who don't really understand why everything keeps changing. That store manager is your retention strategy. Every piece of research on frontline turnover points to the same thing. People don't leave companies, they leave managers, which means your 81% turnover rate that I've talked about has a manager layer embedded in it that most organizations never examine. And that store manager is your customer experience. What happens on that floor, the greeting, the service recovery, the closing of the sale, the training is a direct reflection of how that manager leads, coaches, and shows up for their team. And in a period of peak ambiguity, the store manager is the most important stabilizing force in your entire organization. And most retail companies are dramatically underinvesting in developing them. And that's not just my opinion. That's 30 years of watching what happens when you do that and what happens when you don't. And lastly, my third human truth today, that this ambiguity is a competitive advantage if you invest in this right layer. So here's the reframe I want to offer on this conversation, because peak ambiguity isn't just a threat. For the retailers who respond correctly, I would call it a window. And the environment is uncertain. Yes, every company in your competitive set is making the same reactive moves. They're freezing headcount, they're pulling back on training, they're asking managers to do more with less. I've seen the playbook, it's almost universal, which means the companies that do the opposite, that invest in their frontline managers, that communicate clearly when others go quiet, that treats uncertainty as a reason to develop people rather than delay that company creates a gap that's very hard to close. And McKinsey's research is very consistent on this. The retailers with the strongest frontline investment in training, in development, and management capabilities outperform their peers by 3 full percentage points in comp store sales. And in an uncertain market, that gap doesn't shrink, it actually widens. And I've seen this play out firsthand. Some of the strongest retail cultures that I've personally been a part of were built during difficult periods, not because the market was forgiving, because it definitely wasn't, but because leadership made a deliberate choice to invest in people when everyone else was pulling back. And what I watched happen was remarkable. The teams that felt invested in during hard times became extraordinarily loyal. The managers who received real development and real communication became the most effective leaders I've ever worked with because they had been trusted with the truth and they rose to meet the occasion. And peak ambiguity is the moment that separates retailers who treat their frontline as a cost from the ones who treat them as a strategy. The first group will manage through the cycle the same way they managed through the last one: high turnover, disengaged teams, and a customer experience that reflects exactly how much they've invested. And that second group will come out on the other side of this with something the first group can't buy: a frontline that trusts them. And in a market where consumer trust is fragile and employee loyalty is rare, that's the most durable competitive advantage in retail. The front line is your bottom line. Invest there first, especially when it's hard. So, to wrap up, here's the question I want you to think about. In your organization's response to uncertainty, is the front line being protected or depleted? Are your managers being developed or just managed? And is the communication flowing from the top, reaching the floor, or stopping somewhere in the middle? Because the ambiguity at the top is real. But what you choose to do with it, how you lead through it, how you invest through it, how you communicate through it, that's entirely yours. And I've built 4 episodes now that I think form a complete argument. We talked about the investment gap, the turnover tax, the trust gap, and now this idea of peak ambiguity. And what connects all 4 of them is actually the same thing. It's not the economy, it's not technology, it's not the consumer, it's the leadership choice. Every single challenge I've talked about has a version of it that gets worse when leaders look away and a version that gets better when they lean in. And leaning in means investing in the people on your front lines before you invest in the platforms. It means treating your store managers as your most important strategic asset, not your most replaceable operational layer. And it means having the courage to communicate honestly when the picture isn't clear. Now, that's not a soft message. That's honestly the most practical retail strategy I know. And everything I discussed today, the macro environment, the manager crisis, the research on frontline investment, all of those resources are linked in the show notes. And I encourage you to go deeper because the data is there and it's definitely worth your time. And if today's conversation resonated with you, the idea that uncertainty is a leadership choice, not just a market condition connected with something you're living right now, it's exactly why I wrote Human Pride. And it's available, of course, on Amazon and ronthurston.com. And for any leader navigating this moment, and for the frontline worker trying to find solid ground inside of it, I wrote this book for you. I'm Ron Thurston. This is Retail in America. If this episode helped you think more clearly about how to lead through this uncertainty, I encourage you to share it with one person who needs to hear it today. Follow or subscribe wherever you're listening so that you never miss a new episode. And I'll see you soon.